Henry's journey to master communication. Henry was a quiet boy. He lived in a small town with his parents and his younger sister, Lily. From an early age, he was known for his kind heart and thoughtful nature. Henry was polite to everyone, but there was one thing that set him apart: he found it difficult to communicate. Whether in school, at home, or even with friends, he struggled to express his thoughts clearly. In school, he was always one of the quietest students. When the teacher asked questions, Henry would lower his head, avoiding eye contact with anyone. He had so many ideas in his mind, but the thought of speaking them out loud terrified him. As his classmates responded with ease, Henry would feel his heart race faster. The fear of being misunderstood, laughed at, or judged kept him from participating. During group activities, Henry would remain silent. While his friends confidently took the lead, Henry would stay back, hoping to go unnoticed. His classmates didn't mean any harm, but they would occasionally laugh when Henry stammered or struggled to finish his sentences. This only made Henry more anxious about speaking. At home, his parents noticed his silence. They often thought he was just an introvert, preferring to spend his time reading or drawing. His younger sister, Lily, however, understood Henry better than anyone. She often encouraged him to speak more. "Come on, Henry, just say it," she would say. But Henry's fear would always hold him back. The simple act of speaking in front of others felt like climbing a mountain. As Henry grew older, his fear of speaking started affecting his life more seriously. In high school, things got worse. Presentations became a regular part of his lessons. When it was his turn to speak, he would freeze. He wanted to do well, but his fear always stood in his way. One day, everything came to a head. Henry's English teacher announced a surprise assignment. Each student had to give a 2-minute speech about their favorite book. Henry felt a wave of panic wash over him. He loved reading, and there were so many books he could talk about, but the thought of speaking in front of the class was terrifying. When his turn came, Henry walked up to the front slowly, his legs trembling. He could feel the eyes of all his classmates on him. His hands were clammy, and his mind went blank. He started speaking, but his voice trembled, and he stumbled over his words. He could hear the giggles of a few classmates, and his face turned bright red. In a rush, he finished the speech and quickly sat down, his heart pounding. That day, Henry's embarrassment turned into a deep feeling of frustration. He couldn't let this fear control him anymore. He decided that he would change. He had to. The decision to change. That evening, Henry sat quietly in his room. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, thinking about the events of the day. For the first time in a long while, he made a decision. "I can do this. I will learn to speak confidently," he whispered to himself. The fear that had ruled his life for so long was no longer going to control him. Henry spent the rest of the evening researching ways to improve communication. He read articles online, watched videos, and even looked for books on the subject. One key point he learned was that communication was a skill that could be developed. It wasn't something you were born with, and it didn't matter how old you were. All it took was time, practice, and dedication. The next morning, Henry woke up with a new sense of determination. He decided to start small and build his confidence step by step. Starting small. Henry knew that he wasn't going to become a great speaker overnight. So, he started with simple tasks. He began reading aloud in his room every day. Whether it was a chapter from a book, a newspaper article, or even a simple poem, he read it out loud. The first few days were difficult. His voice wavered, and he stumbled over words. But he didn't give up. To track his progress, Henry recorded his voice and listened to it. It wasn't easy to hear his own voice at first, but it helped him identify the areas where he needed improvement. He noticed that he often spoke too quickly or hesitated for too long in between sentences. These were things he could work on. As the weeks went by, Henry made progress. He started to feel more comfortable speaking in his own home. He began practicing speaking to his sister, Lily. Every night, he would tell her about his day, his thoughts, or whatever was on his mind. She was patient and encouraging. She never laughed at his mistakes but offered small pieces of advice to help him improve. Learning from the best. One of the most important lessons Henry learned was that great communicators weren't born. They had to practice just like everyone else. Henry became fascinated by successful speakers. He spent hours watching TED Talks, speeches, and interviews. But Henry didn't just listen to the words. He studied how the speakers delivered them. He watched their body language, their tone of voice, and their ability to engage the audience. One speaker, in particular, caught Henry's attention. He was a man who had struggled with stuttering in his younger years. But through determination and hard work, he had become a world-class speaker. His story inspired Henry. If someone who had once been afraid to speak could succeed, why couldn't he? Henry took notes on the things he wanted to improve. He wrote down specific techniques to try, such as using hand gestures to emphasize points, making eye contact with the audience, and practicing pauses to add drama and impact to his speech. Henry was determined to practice every one of these techniques until they became second nature. Stepping out of his comfort zone. After months of practicing on his own, Henry decided it was time to take his skills into the real world. He wanted to test himself in front of others, outside the safety of his room. So, Henry joined a local speaking club, a group of people who met weekly to practice communication skills. The first meeting was nerve-wracking. Henry's hands shook as he walked into the room. But he reminded himself that this was an opportunity to grow, not to fail. When it was his turn to speak, he introduced himself to the group, though his voice was shaky. But the members were kind and supportive. No one laughed or judged him. They simply clapped and gave him constructive feedback. Each week, Henry prepared a short speech. Sometimes it was about a book he had read or a story he wanted to share. Gradually, he became more confident. He learned that people didn't expect him to be perfect. They just wanted him to try. This made the experience less intimidating and more enjoyable. Overcoming setbacks. Henry knew that the road to becoming a great communicator wasn't always going to be easy. He would have bad days, and that was okay. One day, during a club meeting, he completely forgot the line he was supposed to say. His heart raced as he froze for a moment. But then, he smiled, made light of the situation, and continued. The audience appreciated his honesty and even laughed with him. That day, Henry realized something important. Great communicators weren't flawless. They were people who knew how to handle mistakes gracefully. From then on, he never feared making mistakes. Instead, he focused on how to recover and continue. Practice in real life. As Henry's confidence grew, he began using his communication skills in everyday situations. He started talking to strangers, whether it was greeting a shopkeeper or asking a question during class. He noticed that when he spoke with confidence, people responded positively. They smiled back, listened attentively, and respected his words. His teachers began noticing the change as well. They saw that Henry had become more active in class discussions and even volunteered to lead group activities. His friends started asking him for help with speeches, and Henry happily agreed. The speech competition. After a year of practice, Henry's school announced a speech competition. The theme was "The Power of Words." Henry felt a wave of excitement, followed by a wave of doubt. Could he really participate in a competition? What if he failed? He turned to Lily for advice. "You've come so far, Henry. You've already won by stepping out of your comfort zone. Just go and do your best." Inspired by Lily's words, Henry decided to take the plunge. He spent weeks preparing his speech, refining it day by day. He practiced in front of his family, in front of the mirror, and even in the park. The day of the competition arrived, and Henry stood backstage, his heart racing. When his name was called, he walked confidently to the podium. He looked out at the audience, took a deep breath, and began speaking. The words flowed smoothly. Henry used all the techniques he had practiced. His posture was strong, his voice was clear, and his pauses had a dramatic effect. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, the audience erupted in applause. Reflecting on the journey. Looking back on his journey, Henry realized just how far he had come. From the boy who could hardly speak in front of a class, he had transformed into a confident and capable communicator. But he knew that communication was a lifelong journey. There would always be room for growth, and he was eager to keep improving. Sharing the knowledge. Henry didn't stop there. he began mentoring others who struggled with communication. He shared his story with anyone who wanted to listen, hoping to inspire them to overcome their fears just as he had. Henry's journey wasn't just about becoming a great speaker, it was about learning to believe in himself. And now, he was helping others find their voices too. Thank you for watching today's story. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe to help us grow. We really appreciate your support. See you in the next video.